Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we will be talking about this new set of polls from the Bullfinch group that shows Kamala Harris with significant leads across the Rust Belt states, which would presumably hand her victory in the Electoral College, assuming all of the blue states that we expect to go to her do in fact go to her. In Wisconsin, this new poll shows that Kamala Harris is ahead by a whopping 9% over Donald Trump. That is probably her highest or her best poll ever in the state of Wisconsin. In the state of Michigan, Kamala Harris takes the win. She leads in the state over Trump by 5 percentage points. And in Pennsylvania, it's the narrowest of the three, but still a healthy win of 4% over Donald Trump. All three of these margins of victory are well over that margin of victory of Joe Biden. Joe Biden won each of these states in 2020, but in Wisconsin he only won by 0.6. In Michigan, he only won by 2.8. And in Pennsylvania, he won the state by 1.2%. This poll had 1,500 registered voter respondents, and it's not the best poll. But still, definitely, it paints a bigger picture that we are going to get to. Now, this bigger picture. Do I think that Kamala Harris will win Wisconsin by 9, Michigan by 5, and Pennsylvania by 4? No, I don't. This New York Times poll, I think, is far more in line. In all three, Kamala Harris led by 4%, 46 to 50, in each of these states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. I believe that the actual result will be much closer to this than this. However, these are the types of polls that Kamala Harris starts to want, or definitely wants to start seeing. That's what I'm trying to get out. Regularly, because this is the type of polling that we were seeing with Joe Biden back in 2020, and he only won the Electoral College pretty narrowly when you look at the margins in the battleground states. Trump could have pretty easily won the election. The polls, here, I'll just get to it right now. I was going to do it later, but I'll just get to it right now. For example, in Wisconsin, the polls showed that Biden would win by 8. Now the polls are saying that Kamala Harris would win by 9. A little better. So the average of polls said Joe Biden would win by 8. This was on election day, mind you. He ended up winning the state by 0.63%. So the point is, the polls are going to overestimate Kamala Harris. Polls like this, at least, are going to way overestimate Kamala Harris. In these partisan times, I don't even think it would be possible in any way for Kamala Harris, especially looking at the 2016 margin and the 2020 margin. I doubt it would be possible for Kamala Harris to win Wisconsin by 9%. But if you start seeing these types of polls where Kamala Harris is leading by 7 or 8 or 9%, that will be just like 2020. And yes, it was very narrow, but Joe Biden did still end up winning the state of Wisconsin. Michigan, too, let's look at. Michigan was, the polls weren't as far off. Well, I guess they kind of were. Joe Biden led by 8%, and he only won the state by 2.8% on election day. So he was overestimated by some 5%. Now Kamala Harris leads by 5%. So again, she's in the right direction. But if the polls are as off as they were in 2020, then she does need to get her numbers up a little bit. She needs a lot of wiggle room, because in presidential elections, typically, and we'll get to this, maybe it's a little complicated this year, which we're about to talk about, but typically in presidential elections, the polls are going to overestimate the Democratic candidate a little bit. And then in Pennsylvania, finally. In Pennsylvania, back in 2020, the poll said that Joe Biden would win by 5.6. He won by 1.2, so that's a 4.4% overestimation of Joe Biden. Now, Kamala Harris only leads by 4, so again, she wants to gain a little bit more support in these polls to have enough wiggle room where the 2020 margin, would still give her a victory in these states, and then that is when you will start to see some mass consensus that Kamala Harris will win the election. Once she's ahead in the polls by more than Joe Biden was in 2020, she's still not, right? She is still not at the point that Biden was ahead in 2020. But once, you start to surpass those numbers, where even if the polls were as off as they were in 2020, and they were pretty bad in 2020, they were pretty far off, she would still win the election. That is when you will start to see mass consensus around the fact that Kamala Harris will, in fact, win the election. Now, I did want to bring up the fact that the polls might, not be as simple as we think. It might not just be, as we saw in 2016 and 2020, the polls overestimating the Democratic candidate, because what's proven time and time again in 2020, in 2016, and most notably, or because it is so recent, 2022, the polls, and people don't talk about this for some reason, but the polls always overestimate what we think the mood of the country is, what the news portrays the mood of the country as. That is what the polls overestimate, right? In 2016, and it's because people are sometimes, not scared to say who they support, but they don't really think about it that much until, really, Election Day. Like in 2016, people didn't really want to say that they were voting for Trump. They really didn't, because of how the media treated him, because of how, they believed the rest of the country felt about them. They didn't want to admit it, right? That was the thing. They didn't want to admit to even a pollster that they didn't even know, that they didn't want to say it, in front of themselves, that they were going to vote for Trump, but come Election Day, they actually did. So it's the mood of the country. The polls overestimated Hillary because people, didn't answer the polls that they were voting. They didn't answer in these pollsters that they were voting for Trump. Same thing in 2020. Trump was underestimated again. In 2022, it was supposed to be a big red wave, and it was maybe a red puddle, I guess you could say. It was not a red wave at all. So, the mood of the country that the media portrays and that voters think the rest of the country feels, that is what is always overestimated, because the other side doesn't really feel like answering these pollsters. Now, in 2024, it's not so simple, right? Because Donald Trump is not as hated as he was in 2016 and 2020, and it feels like people are much more comfortable saying that they were voting for Trump because of how bad, in many people's view, the Biden administration has been, especially with the economy. There is now, much more openness when it comes to supporting Trump. That's what my interpretation is, at least, of the state of the nation. So, point is, I think that the polls really won't overestimate the Kamala Harris, the Democrat, and they won't really underestimate Donald Trump, at least as much as they did in 2016 and 2020. Now, yes, based off this, if the polls do start to become +9 for Harris, +5 for Harris in Michigan, +9 in Wisconsin, +4 in Pennsylvania, yes, that does mean that she is winning the election, but still, do I think it will be by 9, by 5, by 4? No, I don't. But if she keeps up these numbers, then she's winning. But, I mean, as I said before, with how wrong the polls were in 2020, that difference between the Election Day polls, the results, the average, and the actual results, if you apply that, Kamala Harris would lose in Michigan and Pennsylvania, according to these polls, with these numbers. Now, I currently have her winning Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So, again, that is how that factor of Trump not being as underestimated as he was in 2016 and 2020, that's how that plays into this election. So, great polls, shocking polls for Kamala Harris coming out of the Bullfinch group, shows her winning in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Now, what do you notice? Again, if she holds on to these blue states, Minnesota, Nebraska 2nd, New Mexico, New Hampshire, Maine, Virginia, etc., they were looking a little competitive with Biden as the nominee, but they really do not look really any level of competitiveness at all with Kamala Harris as the nominee. She will really have great Democratic turnout. That will not be a problem for her. So she has those on lock, and then once you add Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and her numbers are looking great here. Just looking at Pennsylvania, she leads by 1.6 on average. She leads in almost every poll. Same story with Wisconsin and Michigan. If she continues these leads, I really think that she wins in these 3 states. And then, it makes it easy because she wouldn't even need the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt will be difficult. It really will. But if she wins these 3, yes, it's close and she doesn't have any wiggle room with any of her states. But, I mean, even if she loses Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, then it would be an electoral tie. So she has 0 wiggle room. But still, it is a win if you carry the Blue Wall Rust Belt states. Now, I think that she will go. I think that she will expand the map. I bet she wins Arizona. And I currently have Arizona and Georgia being extremely small margin for Donald Trump, but he does take them. So it is still a very close election. Definitely a toss-up as of now. So thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe down below. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers before Election Day. Again, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.